he has so many complaints about the system, but he never targets it against capitalism. He never does this. It's always authority, it's always power, but all of this power is disaggregated from economic power. That's what I think is so. That is the poverty of Joe Rogan's intellectual critique of society.
When the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part.
So Joe Rogan, fresh off his COVID diagnosis and COVID recovery, is now peddling conspiracy theories, which to some extent he has already peddled them, regarding the tyrannical authoritarian nature of vaccine mandates. And he goes on a completely unhinged rant in his latest video with a guy called Patrick Bet David, who is, I think he's LA based. He's an entrepreneur and self-help guru. And the reason that I'm familiar with him is because, quick story of this channel, before I publicized this channel in May, I spent a month or two doing, testing this, testing the format of the videos, and I also did some streaming. And during one of the streams, I made a reaction video to a dating video that this guy made. And what I found rather funny was that YouTube basically canceled the stream immediately because of a copyright violation. So he is very protective of his intellectual property. So I guess no more reaction videos to Patrick Bet David. But anyway, this is the Joe Rogan show where I can do reaction videos, thankfully. So let's watch this because this is really crazy.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Our communities, it's all over the place on YouTube, but because of this current pandemic, they feel like there's this heightened sense of responsibility that they have to control the narrative. And that's very disturbing to me. And what's even more disturbing to me is how people, when they agree with that narrative, don't understand where this all goes, and they're agreeing with that censorship. They're like, yes, censor those people, get rid of those voices, deplatform people that I disagree with.
Okay, you can kind of see where this is going, but the issue here is whether people who are openly promoting misinformation should be to some degree deplatformed or canceled or whatever. I have real issues with this being done by tech companies. So whether it's YouTube, Twitter, whatever, I have a lot of problem with this. I do agree with the anti-censorship crowd, even though some of them are not exactly on my side of the ideological spectrum, but I do think that it is problematic to let these companies police the discourse. And I know this as a victim of that policing because YouTube took down a video that I made debunking vaccine misinformation. And the video that I debunked is still up there. It's gotten more than 1 million views. It was a video from Kim Iverson of Rising, still up there. My video, which I guess the algorithm assumed that I was the one promoting the vaccine misinformation, was taken down, and now my channel has a warning. So I'm not happy about that. And so yeah, I have issues with tech companies doing the censorship. I also probably would agree that it would be bad if the government does this censorship, takes direct action. But here's the other thing. The part that he's lumping in with all of this, and that is the social censorship. That is, in the case of, because what he's referring to is the Nicki Minaj claim that a parent, some cousin or something back in Trinidad got, swollen testicles or something because of the vaccine. Completely untested. There's no evidence that this is actually a side effect, whatever. And obviously she's gotten a lot of heat on social media for her comments, and I think that is entirely warranted. Like, I think if we want to socially discriminate the people who are peddling conspiracy theories and misinformation, I am fine with that. I am totally fine with that. But Joe Rogan and the other people who are what would be described as kind of softcore anti-vaxxers don't want any of that either. So it's not just about the actual censorship from government or from tech companies. They don't want any social ostracism of these people at all. And that is what I think is incredibly problematic, because social policing is often the best way to create social cohesion. And it is precisely the midpoint between not doing anything about it versus giving too much power to certain authorities to do something that we as a society can do. So if we can shun, if we can ostracize these people, I am fine with that. Totally fine with that. Because guess what's going to happen? The moment, if for whatever reason they are proved right, then that same society that ostracized them can reverse that ostracism much better than if the government did so, or if a if like a tech company deleted her Twitter account, there's no guarantee that it will be restored. Whereas from a social perspective, if she is proven right, she has a claim to say, hey, I was right about this all along. And, a good example of this to some extent has been the lab leaks theory. Early in the pandemic, any suggestion that COVID was a man-made disease was immediately labeled a conspiracy theory. Then the lab leaks theory started gaining some popularity. It is obviously different than saying it's man-made. That's not the claim of the lab leak theory, but it has gotten certain credibility. And, even governments are trying to investigate whether there was some involvement, whether it's through things like gain of function research, etc. I am open to the possibility that that might have some credence. I don't necessarily think it's true, but we've now accepted a theory that had conspiratorial aura a year ago. So that is how I think, we can change the narrative of these things. But yeah, let's see what else he says.
And they don't understand where this goes. It's like where people are saying, the people that have been vaccinated, that want a vaccine passport. Yes, we should have a vaccine passport. I've been vaccinated. That's not going to. It's only going to help me. Yeah. I did my part. I took one for the team, and I went out and got vaccinated to be a good citizen. Those people who didn't, fuck them. We should have a vaccine passport.
Makes zero sense.
But here's the problem with it: the vaccine passport, it doesn't end there. It's going to keep going, and it's going to lead to some sort of a social system. You're going to have a social credit system similar to what they have in China.
You think it'll happen in our lifetime?
100%.
You're saying?
Okay. So here's the problem. If you know a bit about logical fallacies, you will realize that this is one of the biggest ones of all, the slippery slope fallacy. It's called a fallacy for a reason. This idea that, any form of social control or government power that didn't exist yesterday is going to lead to more and more and more until we become an authoritarian, tyrannical state. And the problem is that governments around the world gain additional power all the time. And they don't necessarily translate that into authoritarianism. The Norwegian government today has way more powers over its citizens than it did 50 years ago because of technology, because of administrative advances, whatever you want to call it. That does not mean Norway has suddenly turned into an authoritarian state. So now, can this happen? Yes, of course, because authoritarian states have begun in some cases by, becoming slightly more tyrannical over time. A good example of this is Venezuela. When Chavez became president, Venezuela was still a democracy. But democracy was chipped away little by little, and by the time Maduro came to power, now it's a dictatorship. So there are examples of this happening, but you still need. My point, the reason why it's a fallacy is because it is a statement that is made without evidence that it's actually happening. And if we look at last year, for example, during the lockdowns, governments had way more power than they had over individual private citizens in probably at any point since the world wars. And guess what happened? Most of that power has now been relinquished because lockdowns are over. In some countries, no, like Australia, and there is a case to be made that they're maybe taking their lockdown policies a bit too far. I would tend to agree with those who claim that. But in most other Western countries, they have reverted those powers. So just because the government has the ability to do something does not necessarily mean that it's going to keep doing it. And that's what people like Rogan just don't understand. We could be in a complete, utter, total tyranny now with the powers that the government had over society during the lockdowns. But no. So a vaccine mandate is the realization that we're unable to keep freedoms, keep most people from enjoying the life that we had before COVID, without it being ruined by a significant amount of a population, especially in a country like the US, that refuses to get vaccinated and refuses to participate in this social fucking contract because they are selfish, individualist assholes. That's the truth. That's what they are. So, do you want your freedoms back? Take the fucking vaccine. And download a fucking app that says that you did so you can enjoy life like you did before. It's that easy. But even that is too much for these people. Anyway, let's keep watching.
100% it can happen in
Are
our
you
lifetime.
okay with that?
No.
Okay, so then
100% can happen in our lifetime because people will step with it. They will go, as long
Right.
as it benefits them and as long as it aligns with their ideology, they will ignore the dangers of a social credit system and they will embrace it.
Yeah.
If I would never thought people would be, look, 6 months ago, the White House was saying there's no way we would ever use some sort of a vaccine mandate.
Oh,
There's
no, but
way.
Kamala said I would never take the vaccine that
So
Trump's
did-
coming.
so did Biden.
Yeah, both of them said that, yeah.
Yeah.
That was before the Delta variant, by the way. So we thought we had COVID under better control than we know now. It really is I mean, a lot of these complaints are simply people who don't understand just how much policy has to change as a result of the Delta variant. And I'll give a good example of this. I personally think that with Delta, lockdowns are pointless. Absolutely pointless because it's so fucking contagious that lockdowns mostly worked back then, but Delta is so much worse than the original strain or, the British strain. I'm going to call it the British strain, by the way, because they always call the other countries the Indian or Brazil variant. So this is the British variant. Delta is much worse than all of these. So, the only solution with Delta is to get vaccinated and, live freely. There is a risk that we will all get Delta at some point. But the vaccines will make it less risky. So, Jesus Christ.
They both did.
Yeah.
But then once they got into office 6 months ago, they said we would never use a mandate. We would never try to force businesses or people to be vaccinated. Now they are saying that. Now they want you to do that. Did you see that video where they're talking about Biden's talking about the hurricane?
No.
Have you ever seen this?
No.
Have you seen that, Jamie? Here, I'll say the one where the kid's laughing. Here, I'll send you this one because this is the funniest one. Because these guys were watching them say this, and as these guys are watching them say this, it's just funny. Here, I'm gonna send you this. Hold on, give me 1 second. It's
Hurricane.
yeah.
Biden.
He's telling them they should get vaccinated before the hurricane comes.
It's obviously a joke, right?
No, it's not a joke. He's being dead serious. But you got to watch this. I just sent it to you, Jamie. Let's watch it.
I was
Watch it on the
going
screen.
to
We'll have
skip
a
this,
nice
but
laugh.
it's
Because
quite short.
it's not that you shouldn't get vaccinated. That's not what I'm saying. It's just like the narrative is so overwhelming that it applies to everything now. It applies to the fucking hurricane. Play this. Give me some volume.
The state where hurricanes often strike,
Look at these two guys.
like Florida or the Gulf Coast or into Texas. A vital part of preparing for hurricane season is to get vaccinated now. Everything is more complicated if you're not vaccinated in a hurricane or a natural disaster hits.
Dude, how the hell does that make any sense, though? Okay.
Okay, so the reason that makes I think the way that Biden expressed it was pretty poor. and it makes it sound ridiculous, but there is a case to be made in an emergency situation, in a natural disaster. You would want the widest availability of hospital capacity, and if it's going to be taken up by people that by anti-vax fuckheads clogging up hospitals, then you will have no space to treat people who are actually injured by the natural disaster. So that does make actually a lot of sense. But this is a bit too complex for the brain of Joe Rogan.
So
People are just stepping in line.
You're
They're stepping in
not
line.
saying don't take the vaccine. That's
No,
not what you're
no,
saying.
I think a lot of people should take the vaccine.
Okay, so I got a story for you here from my personal hand. My dad is 79 years old, okay? Conversation came about the vaccine. He said, are you taking it? I said, I'm not taking it. I was in the Army. The first day of going into the Army, they give you 11 air shots when you go in. Pss, 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 and you just go through. Literally. You walk
11 shots in one day?
shots in one day, back to back to back. And you say, don't move. If you move a little, you get a scar. I mean, I'll
Sounds like a vaccine mandate.
never forget this. I was 18 years old. So I've had plenty of vaccine in myself. It's probably why I'm a little bit off. But so my dad, okay, he says, should I get the vaccine? I said, Dad,
That's probably why you're not dead.
it's up to you. What do you want to do? He says, Pat, I'm 70-some years old. I said, Dad, if you're 79, do what you want to do. He said, I want to get the vaccine. He said, when I got the vaccine. Great.
Holy shit! Like if my thankfully my oldest parent, which is my mother, is still considerably younger than that. But if my mom was 79 and she was like debating whether to have the vaccine or not, I would be like, I don't know what I'd be doing. I'd be freaking out. Thankfully, my entire family is pro-vaccine, as most people in developing countries where they recognize the usefulness of vaccines. I think that's the problem why there's so much anti-vax sentiment in rich countries. That the time where people had to worry about dying of an infectious disease is so long ago that there's various generations that have now gone through not living through that. Whereas people in my side of the world, it's still kind of fresh. My generation is probably the first one that really just didn't have to worry about any of this. But the generation before me, probably, some of them did have some experience with this. And definitely the generation of my grandparents, they definitely had experience with this. I'm sure they did. So this is still fresh. The stories are still there. But yeah, I'd be terrified if my mother was 79 years old and was debating whether to take it or not. And this is a true story. My mother is currently living in a country that is where vaccines are not very widespread. She flew by her own expense to Mexico to get vaccinated when it was her turn to get it. And she recently came down with what is highly possibly a Delta. She didn't get severely sick, but she's lost her sense of smell and taste now for well over a week. So that is slightly suspicious. That's why I think it wasn't just a flu or a cold. So it worked. My mother could be on a freaking ventilator right now as I'm saying this, if it wasn't for the fact that she got vaccinated. So I'd be terrified. I wouldn't just be having this casual conversation like, well, it's your personal choice.
I didn't get the vaccine. I got COVID. So he ends up getting the vaccine. And 2 weeks.
Okay, so there's a case to be made that if you've recently had COVID, you can probably delay the vaccine. If you've had COVID, in the last, 3 months, perhaps, maybe 6 months at the most. I'd be worried about 6 months because at least in the last 3 months, if you had the vaccine, it would probably be Delta. So you would have antibodies against Delta. I would still say that is not a reason to never get vaccinated. I would simply say, well, you can afford to wait a bit. Perhaps there is, some slightly higher risk of the already very, very rare side effects if you get vaccinated shortly after having COVID. I don't know. But beyond 6 months, I don't think there's any reason not to get the vaccine. And he's not saying when he got COVID, which is a bit worrying. Because if he got it at the very beginning of the pandemic, yeah, I would not trust my my immune system. I also got COVID at the very very beginning of the pandemic, and that has not been a reason for me not to delay. Sorry, no reason not to take the vaccine.
Weeks ago, he just got his negative back from COVID. He got positive and he got pneumonia. My dad at 79, and he is okay. He's done. He scored away. He has nothing to worry about today. Would it have been different if he didn't have the vaccine? I don't know. Okay.
Most likely it would have been.
Most likely would have been. So I
would've
think
been
it
worse.
made sense that he
Yes.
took the vaccine and it benefited him. A friend of mine, younger than in my 20 years, in great shape, didn't have the shot, didn't take the shot. He got vaccine, he got COVID and had pneumonia, was in a hospital for 4 weeks. Literally, he was hospitalized, right? For myself, I didn't take the vaccine. There's a few reasons why I haven't taken it.
You realize like the story that he's telling is clearly, it's obvious. It's better to get the vaccine or not, but they're never openly saying it. That's what is so problematic about these people. They never openly say it. They still frame it in an issue of it's your personal choice. Well, yeah, if you're old enough, you should take it. But, you know, wink, wink. But they're never open about saying it. Why is this hard?
Vaccine yet. That's my own reason why I haven't taken a vaccine yet. But the biggest challenge for me is the conversation of being forced to take the vaccine. So Nicki Minaj, I'm sure you're kind of following the story with what's going on with Nicki Minaj.
Her cousin's testicles.
Her cousin's testicles, yeah, in Trinidad. And people are saying, are you kidding me about these testicles? So whether these testicles are just massive or something happened to them or it was because of the vaccine, let's set that aside with the testicles.
I've never heard of testicles swelling as a side effect.
I've heard of other things, but not
Yes.
because of the vaccine. So,
Yes.
okay, so that's that part. All right, so she goes up there and she says, I don't want to take it. On her live, well, Joe, you got to listen to her live. It's so funny because she puts the camera and the camera's at the ceiling. You
And
never
she's just
see her
talking.
face. You're just
Right.
talking. It's alive, right? And she says, let me get this straight because she put it out on Twitter that I got a call from the White House to go and have a meeting at the White House with the health secretary and what do you call it, with Fauci, right?
Mm-hmm.
Meeting with Fauci. And she said, I would like to come, but I would like it to be live. Instead of me traveling, I'd much rather not travel. Let's do a live. And they say, yeah, we don't mind doing a live. We just don't want it to be recorded. She says, no, I want it to be recorded because I want my audience to see whether this is, you know, so I'm honest with the audience. They said, well, let us think about it. She has her PR rep on it and her agent on the call. So it's not like she's by herself. Then the White House comes back and says, no, we never told you that you're going to be doing this live, right? Because she tweeted us and I got a call from White House. And she says, why can't I have the choice to not do it? Why can I not have the choice? The biggest contradiction for
To
me,
not do the vaccine.
I don't want to take the vaccine. They're forcing her to do it. And, you know, you heard a couple of the folks from, I don't know what it was when they came out and they said, who was the lady that we were talking about? She said, I got 2 million followers, girl. I'm not at your level with, you know, 22 million followers on Twitter. You know, you can do better, girl. You ought to be ashamed of yourself for doing this because now people are not taking a vaccine.
Who said that to her?
Who's Joy, what's her name?
Joy-Ann Reid.
I
Yeah.
think that's what it was.
Yeah.
And so she comes back and she says, just because I don't want to do it, I don't want to do it. So why do I have to do it? I may end up doing it because I have to go on tour and I have to do this part. But if you're going to a point, Joe.
Oh, so she's not canceling the tour for her vaccine views? That's odd. Is it because she's gonna make a bucket load of money from her tour that she's actually gonna that's what's gonna force her to take the vaccine? Money? Really? I mean, I'm sorry, but this doesn't seem to be, you know, your very deeply held view against vaccines if you're willing to do it for money. This is pathetic. This is pathetic. This is why these people deserve all the fucking social ostracism for their stupid fucking decisions. Because when it comes down to doing it for the money, they will do it.
Yourself, well, you're talking about 100% this is going to happen in our generation. Then I ask you, are you okay with that?
I didn't say 100% it's going to happen. I said 100% it could happen. That
Okay.
we
Dude, there is 100 possibility that anything could potentially happen. There is 100% probability that a tree can sprout on my head. Okay? 100% probability that it could happen. He never took a statistics class. That I can absolutely guarantee you.
have a social credit score in this country. The same people that are accepting a vaccine passport. My position is I do not believe once the government has the ability to control your movement, what you do, and when you do it. If
they already have that power. The government has had that power for a long time. How was lockdown, you know, government imposed lockdown even possible if they didn't have the power to do it beforehand?
they can put limitations on your freedom. And that is what it is. That it makes it easier to control people. Once they do that, I do not believe they're going to leave it at a vaccine passport.
They just did. There were lockdowns. There were way more restrictions on individual freedoms a year ago, and those restrictions, most of them have gone. So, again, why is this slippery slope fallacy being always used to suggest that it will lead to authoritarianism when we have clear evidence that it's not the case? You know, the irony is that these people always, you know, especially libertarians love the slippery slope fallacy. Curiously, they never apply it backwards. They never apply it, for example, if we cut taxes, it's just going to lead to lower and lower and lower taxes for the rich. If we deregulate this, it's just going to lead to less and less and less regulation for everything. They never, for those cases, the slippery slope fallacy does not apply. It only applies when you want to fearmonger about something. But again, that is why the slippery slope fallacy is called a fallacy. Let's not just call it the slippery slope. No, it's a slippery slope fallacy. Always, always say that it's a fallacy.
Agree with you.
I think they're going to expand it, and
Sure.
I think the next logical move is some sort of a social credit score. And you will look at a bunch of things. Have you paid your taxes? Are you
Wait, do they not check already if you don't pay your taxes? Are you kidding me? This guy doesn't have to worry because he probably has a team of fucking accountants doing his money. But what do you think happens, Joe Rogan, when you don't pay your taxes? Do they just like smile and be like, well, you know, pay him next year? What the fuck? There's a reason the IRS is like the most feared institution in the US. Not unless you're rich. Unless you're rich.
in debt? Do you owe money on your credit cards? Are you in default of loans? Have you been vaccinated? Have you voted? And all those.
All of these things exist. All of these things exist. What the hell? What are credit scores for? He doesn't have to worry about a credit score because he can buy a fucking mansion with his whatever he has in his bank account. He's a fucking millionaire. What the hell? How is there are already vaccine mandates for schools, things like that. The army has a vaccine mandate, as the other guy that he's speaking to already mentioned. These things all exist already.
And who you voted for.
Well, that would be problematic, but all those things could be designed into a social credit program.
Yeah.
Where you could see in a person who has poor social credit, a person who's been to jail for armed robbery, a person who owes taxes, that person would have a lower credit score and they wouldn't be allowed into certain buildings.
Why is this a bad?
There already are restrictions to all of this. Do you think people with a criminal record aren't suffer from lower employment possibilities? There's NGOs that are fighting for this. Approximately 77 million Americans, or 1 in 3 adults, have a criminal record. Having a criminal record can make it difficult or even impossible for an individual to work in a given field, especially one that requires an occupational license. In 2014, employment barriers faced by people with felony convictions, including occupational licensing and other challenges, such as lower levels of education and job skills, were associated with a reduction in the overall employment rate, amounting to a loss of at least 1.7 million workers for the workforce, and a cost of at least $78 billion to the economy. So this already exists. There are consequences to your life, to your career prospects if you end up in jail already. What about bad credit? Everyone knows what happens in a country like the US if you have bad credits. Poor credit can make it harder to get car and home loans, and to qualify for credit card accounts, you may need to start off with a secured credit card to build your credit. Even if you are offered a loan, chances it will be at a higher interest rates. Consumers with lower credit scores generally pay more for auto, renters, and homeowners insurance. Employers may run a credit check before offering you a job, especially if you're applying for a management position or one that involves handling money. So all these things already exist. There is already a de facto social, what's he calling it? Like a social credit system in not just in the US, but in most most capitalist countries. The problem here, this is what's so infuriating about Joe Rogan and the people who follow him, who idolize him. He has so many complaints about the system, but he never targets it against capitalism. He never does this. It's always authority, it's always power, but all of this power is disaggregated from economic power. That's what I think is that is the poverty of Joe Rogan's intellectual critique of society, that he never attacks power, economic power, only political power, but seems to think that there is a separation between the two, which is why I think a lot of his followers are sort of like techno-libertarian douchebags and far-right reactionaries.
That thing.
It's because it's control. It's having the ability to tell people what they can and can't do. Having the government, if you're a free person.
Yeah.
Again, the ability exists already. It has existed for a long time. This is not new.
I mean, you've made mistakes, or you're trying to do better in your life, but you've had some horrible scenarios in your past. You're supposed to be free to try to navigate and do better in your life. If you're restricted, and very clearly restricted by a set of parameters that's decided by other people, that doesn't have to do with law. Like, it's not like you need to be locked up because you're a criminal. You have a social credit score like they're implementing in China. What it does is it keeps people scared, and it keeps people in line, and it's a fantastic way to control the population. And that's what it's used for.
Should we do something about it?
That's what capitalism does. All these things are to scare people. The reason that people, for example, don't have universal healthcare is so that healthcare can be tied to your job. So there's a genuine fear of losing out on your healthcare by quitting your job. Do you think how much more dynamic the labor market would be if it weren't for the fact that a lot of people aren't quitting shitty jobs because they're afraid to lose their healthcare? All these things are at root some kind of economic injustice and some kind of economic power being imposed on working people. But he's not addressing that, because for him, the real villain is, some bureaucrat in Washington deciding that we should criticize Nicki Minaj. That's the I repeat, the poverty of his intellectual critique.
I think talking about it is a good thing. I think talking about it like we're talking about, allowing people to recognize that this is something that could potentially happen.
You think there's
the
a next
vaccine
step?
passport?
Repeat, everything can potentially happen. You need evidence that it is happening.
Just 6 months ago was conspiracy theory nonsense. Like, people were like, what the fuck are you talking about? You're not going to have a vaccine passport. No one was accepting the fact that this was real. This is stuff that Alex Jones talked about. But
wow, what a great, amazing source, Alex Jones. I'm going to I know it's a fallacy, so I'm going to provide some evidence. Who is your source? Alex fucking Jones. You gotta be kidding me. Shoot me in the fucking face right now, please, someone.
now it's a real thing.
LA and New York, yeah.
Yeah, it's a real. Is LA now?
Oh, yeah, they just announced it 3 days ago.
Right after Newsom.
Right after
won
Newsom,
the
they announced it the
re-election?
next day.
God
That's right.
damn.
The next day they announced it.
How clever. Watch the entire episode for free.
I don't know what else to say. I think I've said it all. This video is already gone past the 30-minute mark. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. And really, this is don't resort on the slippery slope fallacy unless you have evidence to back it up. And that evidence better not be Alex Jones. But I don't know what to say about. I don't understand how this guy is taken seriously by a significant amount of people. I don't understand why he is that popular. Anyway, help me reach the same number of Joe Rogan views and subscribers by liking, sharing, and subscribing to this channel. And thank you all. Have a good Friday.